Hi there, I'm Renee Long, a creative writer and the founder of LitHabits for Writers. And today I have the incredible honor of sharing my conversation with best-selling author Jessica Brody. Jessica Brody is the author of the #1 best-selling writing guide, Save the Cat Writes a Novel, and the founder of the online writing school, Writing Mastery Academy. She's also written over 20 novels for teens, tweens, and adults, including The Geography of Lost Things, The Chaos of Standing Still, A Week of Mondays, 52 Reasons to Hate My Father, and the first 2 installments in the System Divine series, Sky Without Stars and Between Burning Worlds, which is a sci-fi reimagining of Victor Hugo's Les Misérables, co-written with Joanne Rendell. Jessica's books have been translated and published in over 23 countries, and several have been optioned for film and television. She lives with her husband and 3 dogs near Portland, Oregon. As a teacher myself, creative writers are always asking me about how to structure their novel or book and how to handle the messy middle, or as Jessica calls it, the muddle. When I read Save the Cat, I was blown away by its practicality and the ability to break down the overwhelming task of writing a novel into small, reasonable steps. And I now recommend this book to all of my writing students who are working on novels or even memoirs. So if you've ever struggled with plot structure, ran out of steam in the middle of the novel, we've all been there, or simply have no idea where to start, this interview is for you. So in this interview, we talk about the 15-point beat sheet that functions as your roadmap for writing a novel, how the beat sheet works whether you are a pantser or a plotter, what to do when you're overwhelmed by how much ground you actually have to cover in a novel, how to master that messy middle in one simple step, and the one question you must ask yourself every single morning that will instantly transform you from an amateur writer into a pro writer. And so much more. Plus, Jessica offers a really fiery pep talk for the writers at the end of our interview, so you'll want to watch all the way through. Lastly, don't forget to download your Lightbulb Catcher worksheet that has specific free writing prompts that will help you take the wisdom you gained in this interview and integrate it into your own writing life and practice. So fill out the form below and hop on the LitHabits VIP list so you get that worksheet straight to your inbox. I'm so thrilled to share this interview with you, and without further ado, here is my conversation with best-selling author Jessica Brody. Awesome. Okay, so we are here with Jessica Brody, the author of Save the Cat Writes a Novel and many, many, many other amazing novels. So I am so glad to have you here with us, Jessica. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Renee. I'm so happy to be here. I was honored to be asked.
Awesome. All right, so let's just dive right in. So many of my writing students and the writers in the LitHabits community really, really struggle with narrative and structure and pulling it all together. And we were just talking a little bit before recording that, I just get asked all the time about structure. And unless you're really kind of looking at somebody's piece of writing, it's kind of hard to pinpoint where the problem is. And that's why I tend to say, like, here you go, just go read Save the Cat. Save the Cat. It's awesome. It will help you wherever you're struggling. So can you, as a writing teacher yourself, I imagine, for me, a lot of my blog articles and trainings come from the questions that students ask me in workshops. So as a writing teacher yourself, you've taught workshops before and currently teach. What questions were you hearing from students, from new writers, that inspired you to write Save the Cat Writes a Novel?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. I don't know if Save the Cat Writes a Novel. I don't know if it was necessarily questions I was getting. It was more that I was sort of brought into the Save the Cat universe many years ago. I was a big fan of the screenwriting book, obviously, and I was using it to plot my own novels. And then I started blogging about how I used it to plot my own novels, and that got the attention of the people who run Save the Cat now. So the original author of Save the Cat screenwriting guide, Blake Snyder, has passed away. He passed away in 2009. But then there's this great team of people that sort of like keep his legacy alive, and they caught sight of some of my blogs, and then they asked me to start blogging for them, and then I started teaching for them, and then it sort of became a book. We eventually were like, we all were like, we should write a book, like a novel version, since we're using this for novels. But I mean, I probably get the same questions that you get, I think that when I was teaching Save the Cat as two novelists before I wrote the book, there was so much about the way writers understand plot and the way writers struggle with plot that went into the structuring of my book, and the way that I teach the method. That I found, like, for instance, like screenwriters, they often will start with log lines and then they'll go like build a log line and then they'll build out from there. And I found that with novelists that just didn't work as well. Like, it was sort of backward. And in case you don't know, a log line is a one sentence pitch of the book, of the story. So I found that like novelists were having a harder time with log lines. And so I started teaching like, okay, get the beats down first and then write the log line. So I structured the book in that way versus Blake's book is structured with log line first. So there was just a lot of things that came up in my workshops, I think, that ended up going into this. A big one was students were very confused about the bad guys close in beat, which is the second half of Act 2. So it was more about like, what were people confused about from the original method, Save the Cat, from the original books, and how could I make that clearer while at the same time making it applicable to novelists?
I love that. And because I feel like in so many writing workshops and fiction workshops, we don't talk about the log line. That's very like specific to screenwriting. And I love that you kind of use the beats first. I think that is really valuable. And actually, I think what I appreciated a lot about your book was starting with the character and starting like, okay, who is this person? What do they want? And what do they need? Right. And that's just how we also function as humans, right? Is like, we have wants and needs, but usually the needs are what we have to get to, right? And that's where the novel comes in. Like, that's where the story is. So I love that. So, okay, so you talked about, that beat, the bad guys close in. You talked a little bit about the beat. So can you give, for folks who haven't read the book,
sure.
Can you give a quick rundown of the beat sheet and why that works for writing a novel?
Yeah. So I describe the beat sheet as sort of a novel roadmap. And I always talk about writing a novel as a metaphor for taking a cross-country road trip. And if you think about like writing a novel as like, okay, I'm going to get in my car in Los Angeles, where you are, and I'm going to drive to New York. If you think about it that way, you're like, you're never going to leave, because it's just too daunting of a process. You're like, I have to drive how far? I have to write how many pages? So I feel like what the beat sheet is, well, first of all, just technically, it's a 15 beat plot point outline, or I call it a blueprint for a good story. And it breaks down all stories into the same 15 beats or plot points. And the way I see it being useful is it's like when you start your road trip in Los Angeles, and if you think to yourself, well, I only have to get to Las Vegas. And then the next day, I only have to get to Salt Lake City. And then the next day, I only have to get to Denver. And you break it down into these smaller, more achievable goals. You're going to have an easier time getting cross country, and you're going to have an easier time getting through the story. So, while most writing methods, they teach a 3-act structure, which breaks a 300-page novel into, maybe 150, 75-page chunks. That's still a lot of text, right? That you're like, what do I do in all of that space? So again, the breaking it into these 15 beats, I think, is just super helpful in making sure that you are staying on the right track, and that you don't end up in Canada or Mexico when you wanted to get to New York. And so I think of it sort of like that roadmap that makes sure that you are hitting all of the right points, and that you're always heading in the direction that you want to head.
I love that. And I do want to say, because I know you talk about this in the beginning of the book, that novelists who are more of what we call pantsers, who just like to write by the seat of their pants, they're resistant to structure or formula or outlining. And I am actually, when it comes to fiction, I'm different. I have different processes for like nonfiction and how to versus fiction. But when it comes to fiction, for me, I'm a pantser, and I still really found the beat sheet extremely valuable, because it's so, especially for pantsers, you can get lost. You can end up in Canada, and you don't, it's not about taking the beat sheet and like making an outline. It's just making sure that wherever you are, you're in the right state. You're on the right highway. You're using the elements of fiction that resonate with human beings. So I just want to put that out there for all the pantsers who are like, oh, this is too, like it's an outline, not an outline, not another outline. No, it's not an outline. It's a map.
Yeah.
I love that. And whether we're pantsers or plotters, we still need the elements of fiction, since all the way back since the early Greek drama, we've needed these elements. So
Right.
I love
Well,
that.
I always say, the structure has to get added in somewhere. It doesn't matter when you do it. If you're a plotter, then you're gonna probably try to figure out the structure in advance. If you're a pantser, you're just gonna go and you're gonna see what you end up with, and that's great. And then you're gonna have all these pieces that you need to fit into a story. And so then the structure is going to get added in the revision, but somewhere along the way, you're going to have to structure this thing. And so it's sort of like when people say, oh, is it for plotters? I'm like, no, it's for anybody. It's just a matter of when you actually use it.
I love that. That's a great point. So I was talking to one of my writing students that I actually recommended your book to. And I said, what would you ask her if you were talking to her? And she said, how do I write without letting the guidelines and the plot rules overwhelm me? And I loved that, because I think what happens, and I've noticed with my students, is that they'll see a rule of writing and they'll be like, oh, that's the only rule, I have to follow the rule. And yeah, so that's my question. How do you write without letting the rules and the guidelines overwhelm you?
Well, I think if you're in the kind of state where you feel overwhelmed, then that probably means that you're not letting the creativity flow enough, right? And as I said, the structure gets added in somewhere, and it doesn't matter when you add it. Like, if you want to take the next 6 months and just sort of explore your novel, I think that's great. Like, I always say every first draft is a discovery novel, whether you start with an outline or not. It's just that some people discover more than others. And I think that, if you're the kind of person that tends to feel overwhelmed by a structure or a blueprint or rules or anything like that, then throw it out for now and just write what you want to write and let the story inspire you. We get into writing because we're inspired by character, we're inspired by story. There's something we want to say. And if that's getting in the way of that process, then you need to remove that part of it until later. And a lot of times, I get this, people ask me the same question. It usually comes in like, well, should I be, reining myself in if I'm already 20% of the way in and I haven't hit the catalyst, which is a beat that's supposed to come around 10%. And I say, no, just keep writing. I have this whole I kind of have this whole thing where I say there's two writers that work inside your brain. There's present you and future you. And future you is brilliant. They are like the smartest person you'll ever meet. And the reason is because they've seen the whole picture. They have this whole vision in their heads. You only have this little piece. Present you only knows this much. And it's awful. And present you is like the worst writer ever. But present you has to be the worst writer because they have to get to a point that future you can know everything. So you just sort of have to let yourself go through the process. You have to let yourself write, let yourself be inspired, let everything come out that you want to come out, and then trust that future you, who has all of this perspective, can then come back and look at what you have and say, okay, I can see how I went a little off track here, or I can see how this beat is not really hitting, landing the way it's supposed to. Now I can come back and apply the rules because I'm not as afraid of limiting myself.
I love that. And I think, yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think sometimes it's just a matter of like if we use a gardening metaphor, like the only way we're going to know what's wrong with our plants is if we get our hands dirty and actually get in the garden and get dirty and sweaty and sunburned. Right.
Yes.
And we, I think writers, we spend a lot of time, which thinking is great. And I actually recommend going and taking a walk, going swimming to think about your work, but then you're never going to know where that catalyst is going to come unless you just write it. You can maybe say, oh, it's going to be this, it's going to be a lightning strike and the person is going to, be paralyzed or whatever. And that's the catalyst, but you're not going to know how that plays out until you write it. And so you have to get your hands into the dirt and, start actually planting. So I love that. Thank you for sharing that. So another thing that comes up with almost everybody I work with is the messy middle, right? And you
Yeah.
call it the muddle in your
Yeah.
book. So I love how you described it, and I would definitely say that's where so many writers get stuck and
Mhm.
probably give up on their novel altogether. And that's where we end up with writers who have like 50 unfinished novels on the shelf because they
Yeah.
got stuck in the muddle and didn't dig their way out. So what are some strategies, other than like, my strategy would be, okay, use the beat sheet, make sure that you're, you're following that just as
Yeah.
a structure, as a scaffolding. But, when you get stuck in that, you don't know where to go next. I was even talking to a writer today, and she was saying, what did she say? She said, I just don't, she's like, my whole family wants me to finish this novel because they like want to know what's coming next, but I don't know. I feel like I've run out of steam. I've run out of gas. What are some strategies for surviving the messy middle, that kind of like wasteland area?
Yeah. um, well, okay, a messy middle is almost always the result of not having a clearly defined goal when you break into act two. So anytime your character, when your character breaks into the second act, which means they're leaving the old world behind and entering some sort of new world, and they're trying something new, they always have to have a goal. Like and it has to be something tangible. And because what happens at the middle is the goal is either reached, not reached, or shifted. And shifted because of some sort of circumstance that happens in the middle. So when writers kind of find themselves paddling through the messy middle, it's because the goal that the goal from the break into two was not clearly defined, and now they don't know how to deal with this apex of act two, which is where the goal either succeeds, fails, or has to shift. So and goals usually change in some way at the midpoint. There's usually some sort of new goal introduced, or a shift in a goal. Like if you think of kind of like every murder mystery ever, there's always at the midpoint, there's always a false lead, like a lead that turns out to be false, a prime suspect that turns out to be innocent, something where like everything seemed to be going towards this midpoint, and yet now everything's changed. And that's the key to every midpoint, not just murder mysteries, is that everything is driving toward this midpoint. There's some sort of goal that's driving you there, and then something happens at the midpoint that shifts the whole story. So it usually means if you're slogging through the middle, that the goal wasn't clearly defined enough, and you're not introducing an element at the midpoint to shift the goal. So those are the kind of the two things that have to happen at the middle. It was funny. I was on a panel once with a fellow author, and I don't want to say her name because I don't know if she wants this story shared, but I'll just say that she has written hundreds of novels. Like she is like a prolific queen and just really, really well known and very, very, very good writer. And we were just talking, and someone asked something about writing, and I talked about the middle being either a false victory or a false defeat, meaning the hero either gets the goal that they're after or they don't, and that's it. And she just turned to me, she goes, "You just solved my latest story." It just like clicked into place. And I just was like, oh my God, you've written around circles around me. So it's like all writers struggle with this. It's not new writers. It's not just, people on the second book where, this horrible second book curse. It's every writer like has this problem. So that's how I fix it.
I love that. That's such a great example of that. We're always learning, right?
Yeah.
We're always, and that, I guess it's not about becoming a perfect novelist or like beating fear away or becoming fearless. It's this constant evolution. You could have 100 novels in your back pocket that you've written, and you still might be struggling with the middle,
Yeah.
and it's,
Great.
I love that Elizabeth Gilbert talks about, the shit sandwich, where it's like, we all as writers, well, whatever we choose in life, whether we're going to be a painter or a carpenter or a doctor or whatever, every profession or whatever, every passion comes with its own shit sandwich. And I think that's part of our shit sandwich is like the middle of a novel is hard, but we're also capable of doing hard things, and we're all always learning. So I love that you shared that story. Thank you. That was awesome. So as we were emailing back and forth, so the mission for me at LitHabits is to really share habits and routines of great writers, and to show that we really all can grow into the writer that we want to be, that we don't have to have this tremendous amount of talent, or, like, we don't have to be just these amazing writers off the bat. We can grow into that. And it's so important to have that consistency. And, Stephen King and Maria Popova talk about how consistency, as in choosing a time to write and showing up consistently, whether or not the muse is there at all, is really the key to being a fruitful writer, and to actually getting those books published and being proud of them. And I really believe that routine and having kind of this daily consistency looks different for every writer. Every writer has a different practice, has a different, different habits that they do. So you have over 20 novels written, and so I would totally call you a fruitful writer. So what does your writing routine, whether that's daily, what does your writing routine look like, and how have you cultivated the stamina to finish those longer projects?
Yeah, great question. So yeah, my writing routine has been a question. Many questions are asked about my writing routine. So I actually teach productivity to writers because I truly believe in everything you just said: consistency, routine. And for me, to go along with that kind of the trifecta of consistency and routine, I would say focus management. And prioritization of your writing is just like world changing. And what I mean by that is in my routine, is that I do not do anything when I wake up in the morning. I do not do anything that can distract me from the writing. So everything is geared towards making my writing day effective. So that's from I don't check my phone. I don't even sleep near my phone. It's in a completely other room. I don't turn on any devices except my laptop. I don't open any programs or apps except the ones that I use to write. I don't check email. Like, I do nothing except for I meditate. I take a quick walk with my dog. I journal, and I actually eat the exact same thing every day for breakfast. So again, just sort of muscle memory routine. And then I sit down to write, and I do not do anything else until I've logged my word count. And then I allow myself to check email, to check social media, whatever else I want to do. But the thing that it's very hard for people to do that. And it was hard for me at first too. I was the kind of person who would lie in bed with my phone for an hour and just do everything on Facebook, email, Twitter, and then I would finally get out of bed. And by the time I got to my computer, I was mentally exhausted and I did not want to write. So the thing that sort of got me over it, and it's what I tell people in my productivity hacks class, is every time you wake up and you want to do something else besides writing, you ask yourself, am I a professional writer or am I a professional email? Am I a professional Facebooker or am I a professional emailer? Am I a professional news watcher? What do you want out of, what do you want to be, and what do you want to tell the universe is your priority? And because the first thing you do every day is going to get the most of your attention, the most of your focus, and the best part of your brain. So you want it to be the thing that's most important to you, right? So that was what I would do every day, because email was always my thing. I had to check email first. So I would tell myself, okay, Jessica, do you want to be a professional emailer or do you want to be a professional writer? And the answer is always writer. So that's what gets done first. So that's been absolutely life-changing for me. Just that simple shift in prioritizing what's most important to me.
Ooh, girl, taking us to church. I love that. That's such a good shift, because yeah, there's, we can always just come up with so many excuses or reasons why we can't not sleep with our phone or can't not check our phone in the morning. But yeah, it comes down to what is going to get your attention. Mm-hmm. And the one thing that I love to ask my students, which kind of does something similar, is what do you want to have at the end of your life? On your deathbed, will you have rather had been an amazing emailer that always got Twitter on right in the morning? Or would you have rather had, 5, 10, 20 novels written, or whatever it is that you want out of your life? So I love that. I'm going to start using that too. Am I a professional email checker, or am I a writer? And I love that. It's so, so good. So that kind of segues into my last question on like writing routines is I think the reason that so many of us as writers cling to a routine like that, and especially a morning routine, I call that, in my program, I call it a bedrock. And if you look at any writer, they all have that form, some kind of routine to kind of get them up, like whether it's meditation or whatnot. But it's truly because we all face resistance, right? We all have that fear of, where we'll just sit down and we'll be paralyzed, or we'll sit down and think, oh my gosh, this novel has been done. This concept has been done a million times before. Why is mine going to be any better? Or that I'm not a real writer, and the imposter syndrome. And so all of that is resistance. And so have you experienced that resistance yourself, any form of that? And what do you do to make sure you keep writing?
Yeah. Well, of course, I experience it all the time. It's something that never goes away. I mean, I have never spoken to Stephen King, but I would imagine he would agree with that. I tell people routine is so important because when you have a routine, you don't have to think about it. So, and I sort of always compare it to brushing your teeth. And I know it's not as hard to brush your teeth as it is to write, but if you think like, you don't have to force yourself to brush your teeth every day. Like you don't get up and like do everything else and be like, I'll brush my teeth later. You just do it because it's like something you do. You get up and you brush your teeth or whatever else you do in the morning. Like you don't have to convince yourself to do it. You just do it. So the more you consistently you write, the less of a chore it feels like. Like honestly, if I were to skip writing, it would feel really weird. It would feel like I forgot to put my underwear on or something. Like it would just be like, wait a minute, I didn't do, something's wrong. Because I don't think about it anymore. I just go. Now that doesn't mean that every time I sit down, it's like magic. No. You're going to have good days and you're going to have bad days. And I think, it's the ability to sit down and write anyway that's my big quote, is write anyway. And the ability to do that is what really separates the professional writers from the amateur writers. Amateur writers, and it's okay to be an amateur writer. Like and I'm not saying amateur writers are bad. Like if you just kind of want to write and dabble and write when you feel inspired, like that's great. You probably won't make a career out of writing doing it that way, but that's okay. Like if it's just a hobby. Professional writers know that you can't just wait for inspiration. You have to write anyway. So it's sort of like a mental state that you have to get into. I also have a course on defeating writer's block. And the core component of the course is that there's actually no such thing as writer's block. Because if you can physically write, like if your fingers move and or your pencil can move, you can write. Like you could write I love cats 5,000 times and you're technically writing. But the thing about what people call writer's block is just a fear that it's not going to be what you wanted to write, and it's not going to be what you think you should write, or it's not going to be as good as what was in your head. So it's really just, I call it writer's doubt. It's really just fear. And the more you can just convince yourself to write anyway and accept the fact that doubt and fear and being crap is part of the process, it's sort of like a rite of passage. Like every novel you ever write is going to have the crappiest parts of it. But as soon as you get through those parts, you're like, okay, I checked that box. I can keep going. Because as we talked about before, every novel is a discovery, and you can't know what you have. Like future you can't do their job unless you've written the crap parts, and future you can go, okay, yeah, that part was crap, we're going to change that. But good thing you wrote through that, because look at all the stuff you got it to afterwards. So it's really just like sort of an understanding, a mindset, a knowledge that there are going to be days that you write crap, but it's the ability to move past those days and write anyway is what makes you a professional.
Oh, love it. So, so, so good. And I agree with you 100%. And I think it's Seth Godin who says something similar, where it's like, there's no such thing as writer's block because there's no such thing as talker's block, right?
Yeah.
We could talk. Exactly.
Yeah.
If you can tell a story from high school, when someone asks, "Oh, tell me a funny story from high school," then you can write a story. Like you can, Yeah. So I love that. Thank you so much. So Jessica, thank you so much. Can you tell us what are you working on now? Where can people connect with you and follow you? And tell us all the things.
All the things. I'm working on the third book of my sci-fi trilogy, which is up there. It's a sci-fi retelling of Les Misérables, set in space. So the third book's being written right now. I also, you can find me on I have an online writing school called Writing Mastery Academy. You can just go to jessicabrody.com and you'll see online courses right up on the top. I teach everything from, I have a Save the Cat novel course. I have productivity course, writer's block course, foundations of fiction, like pretty much it all. I've got it all. So that's a great way to connect with me, ask me questions. If you're a member of the Writing Mastery Academy, you get access to our monthly webinars, which is Q&A with me, and a bunch of other great features, as well as unlimited access to all the courses. So find me there. You can, if you go to my website too, I have a free Writing Mastery newsletter. So that goes out every month where I have free writing tips. I just wrote one today all about how to save your catalyst from destruction. And I'm on Twitter, Instagram. I don't know. There's too many things to be on these days.
I know.
I can't get back of it.
I know,
but just go to jessicabrody.com. It's all there. Like all the things are there. Yeah.
I love it. And I do follow you on Instagram, and I love your Instagram too. So that's a good place to go as well.
It's a weird mix of me like taking pictures of my dogs, taking pictures of Jeopardy clues that have something to do with my book, and my books.
I love it. Oh my gosh. Yes. So everybody, like I was telling Jessica, I've gotten so many questions about structure. It's so funny because as soon as I started reading Save the Cat, it was like everyone in the LitHabits community was like, structure, structure, structure. So that is your answer. And, it's just an awesome book. It's such a great resource. Definitely go check out her courses, and Mastery Academy. It looks amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jessica. This has been so helpful and so wonderful. I know so many people are going to just get tremendous value out of your wisdom today. So thank you. Hey there, it's Renee again. Thanks so much for listening to this interview. If you'd like to learn more about Jessica, head over to her website at jessicabrody.com to buy her books and jump into her online writing school, Writing Mastery Academy. Then, don't forget to download your Lightbulb Catcher worksheet that has free writing prompts to help you take the wisdom you gained in this interview and integrate it into your own life and writing practice. Fill out the form below and hop on the LitHabits VIP list so you can get the worksheet straight to your inbox.